you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
I have some questions. First, if you can check for some non-linearity, in the sense that maybe when you are, as you told at the beginning, if you are Spain, in which we have already a significant number of hours, we have more hours than on average, maybe increasing the more instruction time is not very productive. This is one, and the other issue I wanted to ask you if you have taken into consideration that some of the results for some students in PISA are imputed. I mean, so some results are real results from their examinations, but not all the students do the 3 subjects, and some of the results of some subjects are just imputed using their socioeconomic status and the results on those exams that they have actually done.
Okay. So your question about nonlinearity and effect are very important. And I have a table in the paper which I didn't present to you, where instead of using the continuous measure, I divided each school into groups when I have, I don't remember exactly details, up to 2 hours, between 2 and 4, between +4 and 6, and 7 and above, okay? And I use dummy variables as a treatment instead of a continuous measure. And I didn't find, if I remember correctly, much nonlinearity in this exercise. It could be that the assumption that the effect is the same for every subject might be a bit more questionable when you allow for nonlinearity, okay? Because it could be that really to get some gains in mathematics, you have to study at least 3-4 hours a week, while for reading, you already have some gains when you study 2 hours a week, okay? So I would be careful with that, but the evidence in the paper suggests that there isn't much nonlinearities. And you will get gains moving from 1 hour to 3, almost similar to gains moving from 5 to 6 or 7 hours, okay? There are some differences. I cannot reject that they are the same. That's the thing statistically, okay? Now, as much as I remember in terms of the test scores, I used the actual test scores. I didn't use students that have imputed test scores. The sample is limited to students who have actual testing results.
Yes, thank you. Thanks so much, Professor Lavy. I could be inferred from your conclusions that therefore in developed countries more investment should be made on low ESCS status, ESCS schools and ESCS students. Even in Spain, we have, you say, well, the amount of instruction time if you compare with other countries, but we could articulate in some other ways the time, the instruction time for different kinds of students within schools.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's an excellent point, I think. It's another policy angle. Okay, so we have evidence that and I trust these results because I found it for other things as well. People from poor background are benefiting more from quality school inputs. So how can we use that for policy? Okay, so if in Spain, for example, we have fully heterogeneous schools, then you have to do it within school. Okay? So within school, within grades and cohorts and classes, you should devote more time and more attention to the low SES students. So if you cannot do it by exposing, so the case is that if you have high SES and low SES students in the class, in the same class, it would be difficult to split classroom time for the different groups. But well, you can try doing that, which is tracking in a way, but in the opposite direction. And you can actually instruct teachers, train teachers to give more attention in the classroom to the low achieving students, those who come from poor background, from low educated families. That would be actually a practical way of increasing instructional time, even though on average. If schools in Spain are already heterogeneous in terms of SES, so in rich neighborhoods, kids go to some schools, and in poor neighborhoods, kids go to different schools, then, and I don't know if you have it, a compensatory funding mechanism. Okay, so I don't know how you fund primary schools. Do you fund it by per pupil, per class, per school? Like in Israel, it used to be that until 2004, 2003, funding was per class. Okay, regardless of the size of the class. And you get, for every class, a voucher of teacher's time. And the government would pay that time. Okay? Now, the reform that I mentioned that I explored for this study in the Israeli context, I actually designed it for the ministry. And I designed, there was a committee, and I was the scientific advisor and basically the one who did the work for the committee, a voucher per student. And the voucher was differential by the background of the student. So I estimated potential achievements for students by student background, and I could predict the gap, the educational gap between students by their background. And given the budget of the government, we created a gap between, which is about adding 40% of time to the lowest SES students compared to the highest SES students. Now, is it enough? Probably not. Probably not. I mean, I remember seeing a study from someone in Berkeley many, many years ago that said in order to eliminate the gap between blacks and white in the US, you have to endow schools or students that are black students in schools 7 times more in school resources than the white. Okay, 7 times more. Here I'm talking 30%. So if the government budget situation allowed that, you should give much more, okay, much more to students who come from low SES students. I don't know what's the situation in Spain. Do you have differential funding by socioeconomic background of students? No. So this is something called for, I think. I think you would be one of the few countries in the world that doesn't have a compensatory funding mechanisms for education. Okay? There's no reason that a poor neighborhood in Madrid would get the same resources as a rich neighborhood in Madrid. Okay? Given the differences in marginal productivity of teachers' time, and I'm sure that the teachers who are teaching there in the high SES schools are better, they come themselves from a better socioeconomic background. So it's not only the amount of time, it's the quality of teachers which is different. Yeah, so that would be definitely a way to go about in implementing some of the evidence that we find here. Yes, please. John.
So I think there's a small tension in your paper in terms of measurement of the hours, right? Because PISA is supposed to measure skills which are not grade specific. They're more like life skills in mathematics that they've learned over the years at science and so on, while you measure your hours at the grade level. I mean, you ask teachers I guess teachers were asked how many hours do they teach in that particular grade in mathematics, right?
Yes, the teachers.
So, exactly. So there's a kind of tension here. I guess that rather biases your results downward in a sense that if you, well, I don't know, like what's your feeling about that?
Well, I think the PISA testing is, in a way, curriculum free, right? They don't target it to, so countries who do not teach some material at 9th or 10th grade are actually being hurt in the material covered in the tests. Right? So this, for example, one reason in Israel they've changed the curriculum to include material included in the PISA testing. Okay, that's one way to improve testing. Yeah, so the point is right. The material could be, some of it could be generic, not covered in the curriculum, and in that case, the effect of hours of instruction would be 0 on that material. Okay? So I would get a downward bias in the effect. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I can actually address. I don't know if the PISA has any information about how much of the material covered in the PISA tests are covered in the national curriculum of every country. I don't remember seeing that. If there is something like that, but that's again, that would be constant for the country and constant for the school. Okay, so a problem would be for me if in some subjects the country is covered more than in others. Okay? Yeah, I have to think about it, but I probably would bias downward what I find. So this is a lower bound estimate of the value of additional hours of instruction. Yeah, that's a good point. I should look into it.